thank you all for joining us. Typical crowd on a Monday. Appreciate you being here. The Senate released an idea last week to be able to get $200 million in savings and $200 million into the classroom in the form of added classroom funding and teacher pay. We were trying to come to the governor's $200 million savings and to the House and governor's priority of $70 million for teacher pay raise. The Senate released a plan that not only fully funds common education at $200 million, there's an additional increase. What is it, 262 overall? $264 million increase in education overall. So when you hear the governor talk about they have $200 million in education, when you combine career tech, higher ed, common ed, we're at 264 on that. We think we can deliver on his priorities. We think we can deliver on the Speaker McCall's priorities, and we can represent the priorities of the Senate well with this plan. We are very much, very close to a deal. This education funding for about the last month has been the biggest holdup, and we look forward to a resolution on it. I met with the governor at 1:30 today, had a very frank meeting with him, a very respectful meeting, and we invited him to our caucus at 4 p.m., so I will have to be running out of here in pretty short order, so I'm going to open it up to questions. I do have Senator Roger Thompson, the Appropriations Chair, who may be able to answer more specific questions budget related. The governor said that you guys walked away from the table. Never walked away from the table. We have remained at the table in budget negotiations. I am prepared. If they want to negotiate the budget right now, right here, we would do it. And so we have never once insinuated we're walking away from the table. All we did is enunciate the Senate priority. We didn't let the House or the governor define what the Senate priority was. You saw a bunch of social media posts trying to insinuate that they were taking the Senate position. We felt it incumbent upon us to enunciate very clearly what the Senate priority in common education was, and that's trying to get an additional $200 million in common ed. It's a huge priority for the Senate. When they talk about state employee pay raise, we are focused on the two most critical shortage areas in the state of Oklahoma. Number one being teachers. Number two being correctional officers and those other DOC employees who are behind the fence. Our budget that we've given to both the House and to the governor articulates those positions well and prioritizes those two most critical employment needs in the state.
Is it insulting to hear that said then? I mean, or how would you characterize it? You probably don't use that strong of language. But
no, I'm not insulted. This is the budget process. They have enunciated their priorities. He enunciated them at the State of the State. The House has enunciated their priorities in the form of title off bills that came to the Senate. We have enunciated now publicly, just as the other two have, what our priorities are.
The governor stressed he was pretty frustrated that you released part of your plan to the media before sitting down with them and with the House and releasing it. How do you respond to that? And
we requested a meeting on Thursday. That wasn't granted. We did give our numbers to the House on Thursday.
They also indicated that your proposal Thursday downgraded some of their priorities, but wouldn't be real specific. Do you have any idea what they're talking about?
Yes, I have an idea what they're talking about, but we have balanced the priorities of both the governor and the House. We've treated their priorities very, very favorably. We had some concerns on some funding levels at OMES and other things, but we, in the budget proposal we gave both to the House and the governor, have treated the governor's priorities and the Speaker's priorities very, very favorably.
You say you believe you're pretty close to a deal. The governor said he's prepared to stay here until June. It doesn't sound like he believes you're close to a deal.
Well, May 31st is pretty close to June.
Can you elaborate on some of the other funding issues besides OMES where you differed with the House and the governor's office?
If I could, on the OMES, in our budget we have 100% of what the governor's asked for in OMES.
So where's the difference?
There's some other small differences, but they're pretty insignificant. On state employees, the House passed a bill over here, title off, that we're wanting. We actually agree with the governor's enunciated position. We have not seen his revised budget that we're supposed to get this afternoon, so we don't know exactly where the differences are. Oh, great. Yeah, I'd love to see it. Thank you. I'll take a look at
It's
this.
good to see a copy of it.
I haven't seen it yet. So I don't know, I can't go line by line because I haven't seen his budget yet. And we'll respond after we meet with him in caucus and give him an audience.
Public employee pay raise is something that they mentioned. You said something about it. You're focused on the main priorities. Is that, I think they want 2,500 at $92 million across the board.
That's not what the budget priority reflects that I've seen in the most recent, but here is what the big difference is. The governor vetoed a minimum wage type bill, minimum salary budget, and in that veto message, he said that before we did anything on state employee pay, we needed to look at merit, and we needed to find incentives for performance. The Senate agrees with him on that, and we want to look at that over the interim to figure out how best to deliver a pay raise to state employees that's not just an across the board, but thoughtful and one that takes in merit and pay for performance, as the governor enunciated a week or two ago on his veto message of that bill.
So you would prefer to deal with state employee pay raise next year and do 0 on it now?
No, we're not doing 0. I just told you we're going to do money for DOC employees.
Oh, okay.
And so the highest critical need is DOC employees. So it would be a mischaracterization of the Senate position to say 0.
The governor called out the Senate for sharing budget information with the media before sharing it with him, and then he gave us this before you saw it. How would you respond?
You know, I was watching that press conference, and I will share my opinion directly with the governor, but, you know, don't negotiate through the press, and I saw some negotiation through the press. But you know what? The public needs to know where the Senate priorities are. The Senate priority is trying to get classroom funding. We're not ashamed of that. We will sing it from the mountaintops. Classroom funding needs to happen. Teachers shouldn't be having to buy supplies for their classroom. We need to have lower classroom sizes. How do you do that? You put money into the classroom so they can hire more teachers and get the supplies they need to educate our kids. We're not ashamed of this position at all.
And I might add to that, that's been our position all year long. We've been advocating, and it's been out there, that we've been at $120 million into the classroom. And so whenever we look at, they need $70 million for a $1,200 teacher pay raise. We go to $200 million. You got your $70 million that'll be built in for a $1,200 across the board pay raise, plus $120 where we are. Looks to me like a win-win for everybody. We're in the classroom, they're in the teacher raise. Last year we gave the largest teacher raise in state history. This year we'll put the largest amount into the classroom in state history, $200 million. That's a win-win for everybody.
In the current Senate plan, is the teacher pay mandatory, or districts be allowed to do that or use it?
It says of the $200 million, $70 million must be used for teacher pay. The districts off the formula obviously don't get those formula dollars.
So if education funding was the biggest holdup and you seem to have resolved that, why don't we have a budget?
We haven't resolved it because we're at $200 million. When the governor talks about $200 million, I'll let him speak for himself, but my understanding of his $200 million is when you add in career tech, higher ed, common ed, and the flex benefit allowance for common ed. So we're not in agreement on education yet. We're very close, and as Senator Thompson just espoused, this is a win-win for everyone. We get the flex benefits at the $18.9 million. We get $70 million for teacher pay that both the House and the governor have been on since day one. And we've been on classroom funding since day one. We think this is a win-win. And in addition to all of that, we still meet the governor's goal of saving $200 million for next year, and putting our total savings at right at $1 billion.
Just to clarify on the teacher pay raise, my understanding was you all want to run it through the formula. My understanding is the House doesn't, because they don't think it'll actually make it to the teachers. Am I describing that right, or is that not the disagreement?
There was a bill that had the teacher pay bill that McCall was the author of, and I was the Senate author. Had a holdover section from last year. So last year when we gave the historic $6,100 pay raise, we added a section G. The Senate actually added that. And the section G said that no matter where they were on that pay scale, they had to deliver the $6,100 pay raise. Oklahoma has a minimum salary schedule. We believe rather than raising that minimum salary schedule, let's put it directly to teacher pay. Let's not mess with the minimum salary schedule, and let's save the balance for classroom funding. So it's really over that section G in the bill that McCall and Treat had that we are in disagreement on how to deliver the pay raise. We all believe pay
So
raise.
they want to raise the minimum, and you all want to keep the Section G.
Yeah, we do not want Section G. We don't want to touch the minimum. We want to give $70 million in teacher pay and the balance into classroom funding.
But we also believe in that local school board making that decision. And so the $70 million that will be stipulated for the local school boards to use for teacher raises, and then the remainder of 130 that they'll be used lower classroom sizes. That's what we've been trying to do, put more instructional material in the room, put more aides in the room, and we actually make a large advance then in just common education.
When the Senate enunciates its priorities, that should not be offensive. We are elected by our constituents. I'm elected by the Senate at large. We must represent our viewpoint. And to go public with that, I think, is one of the things that we have to do. We need to tell people where we're at. Classroom funding is an absolute priority of the Senate.
Well, can you elaborate a little bit on, and Senator Thompson, you may have more of this in your district, districts that are off the formula. What was the effect of Section G in last year's bill for those districts?
Well, first of all, most of mine are on the formula.
Right.
But if you're off the formula and Section G remains in, you get zero money for the raise, but you're mandated to give the raises. And so we just asked those off the formula last year to do across the board $6,100 pay raise without additional funding into the formula. And so we want to say, let's put it through the formula. The $70 million will go to pay raises for those that are in the formula. If you're off the formula, we're not telling you to give pay raises. We're not telling you not to give pay raises. It's just not going to have that impact on them.
You keep saying you're close. Is the deal still possible this week, or is this a?
Oh, I think it's possible and probable. I'm very optimistic. There'll be a rocky road. There's always a rocky road. There's always a few hurdles. There's always a few bumps right before a deal is had. Just like a calm before the storm, there's normally a rough waters before the agreement out here.
Greg, has the governor ever indicated to you doing the classroom funding maybe next year, since he's focusing on the teacher investment this year?
Last year, we told our members, let's give a teacher pay raise, and we'll look at reform and classroom funding this year, so the next year from last year. So that has been a topic, but we believe the time is now, right here, right now.
And if I can also add to that, last year when the teachers were here, that was their priority. They said, we need money into the classrooms. And still the majority of phone calls that I have received out of my district, overwhelming majority, put money into the classrooms. Thank you for what you did last year. We need money in the classrooms. So that's been our position since we talked to the teachers who were here last year on our campus asking for this year to make sure we're putting money into the classroom. We're honoring our word that we gave to the teachers last year.
Two weeks ago, before you tried to come together with what you announced Thursday, was there a bigger public employee raise in the Senate's version?
We have never had that in our budget. We've always talked about merit and doing something based on merit. Truth be told, there were two parties to it that were at that point.
What does that mean? I'm sorry. Two parties.
We were not in disagreement with one of the parties.
You mentioned $264 million overall for education in your plan. What are the career tech and higher ed numbers?
We're very interested in career tech and program growth. We'll be adding about $5.2 million, $12 million back into their operations. Career tech, higher ed, we're talking about a across-the-board teacher pay raise, 3.5% of $18 million. Fully funding concurrent enrollment, which is very, very necessary, at 3.3, and then a Section 13 offset at $7 million.
We need to get up to visit with the governor. Thank you for your time. Hey, on another note, those of you keeping track at home, executive noms, we now only have 7 that have not been scheduled of all the exec noms. Those will get scheduled this week, so we're well on track to deliver on that as well, giving every gubernatorial appointment their due consideration in committee over the next couple of weeks. So thank you for your time. We've got to get upstairs. And thanks for the budget.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.